Hello everyone, my name is Clantus and welcome to the Iron Bars, my true crime YouTube channel. So without wasting much of your time, I've got two favors to ask of you. The first one, please do give this video a like as it helps my channel with the YouTube algorithm so that it can spread these true crime stories to more people who are also passionate about true crime. Please do that favor for me. And also don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you are interested in true crime, and don't forget to click the bell notification so that every time I upload a new video you get notified. The second request that I have of you is to please support my YouTube channel by clicking the super thanks button and donating some few little cents to this channel to appreciate my work. So having said all of that, let's get into today's case, and it is a hefty one. So I must give you warning that this case today, it is a case that has a lot of graphic descriptions of violence. So if you think you are going to be triggered by such content, please do click away from this video and you can go to my other channel called The Real Clantus Tutorials. There I am currently busy doing Vlogtober. I'm vlogging every single day. So if you are interested in getting to know me or getting into my life a little bit, then you can go there and check that channel out. It's called The Real Clantus Tutorials. I will leave a link in the description box if you are interested. You don't have to subscribe if it's not your cup of tea. But anyways, let me not waste much of your time and let's get into today's case. And it is the case of the satanic killings in Krugersdorp. 6 sadistic killers that ever walked the streets of South Africa. And we are going to be talking about them in this case. So this story has a lot of information on the internet, on the newspaper archives, you name it. At the same time, it is not that straightforward because there are a lot of discrepancies here and there about this case and some little doubts at the end of the day that I think you will have to pay attention to. And then there's another emotional twist to the story towards the end because I do ask you what are your thoughts that you can comment or leave down in the comment section because I am interested to know what are your thoughts about that. So let's get into today's story. So the story involves a multiple number of people, but I'm going to focus much of my attention in the beginning of the video with one individual who basically snowballed all this that we are here today for. So now this individual's name, her name was Cecilia Steyn. Now Cecilia Steyn, I did fortunately found her date of birth and year very easily. She was born on the 22nd of December 1980 in a small mining town of Harrismith in the Free State province of South Africa. So there's not much background about Cecilia. However, the little that I found that she grew up what she described in court, that she grew up in a very dysfunctional family where child neglect was the order of the day. She unfortunately had some childhood traumas that some of them she cannot speak about openly because they triggered her. And also even in court when I was watching her trial, when she was asked about what the childhood trauma was about, she refused to talk about it. Unfortunately, in a court sitting and you are asked about something like that, considering the fact that we are now in court, they needed to understand her mental state and therefore she was asked to answer the question. Even though she was evasive and also at the same time pretty clever in how she was answering this particular question, we did discover that she said that she grew up as an abused child. Close family members did all kinds of things to her. Her parents neglected her. She was never shown love, and she had to basically live on survival mode because at a young age, she could not run away from home because she was dependent on her parents. So it became very difficult for her to make an escape. And even if she did escape as a teenager, she would not know where to go to because she does not know anybody outside of her small town of Harrismith. So when Cecilia turned 16, she met a man by the name of Dries Steyn, whom she became involved with romantically. I think Driss at this time was a little bit, maybe a year older than her. However, they blossomed a relationship which eventually led to marriage, and then they had 2 children. So when Cecilia and her husband moved to Johannesburg, they went and settled in a mining town of Krugersdorp, which is west of Johannesburg, South Africa. In Krugersdorp, Driss Steyn became a police officer, and Cecilia, I'm not quite sure what exactly that she did. Some reports say that she is a school teacher, some reports a housewife, so I'm not quite sure what exactly her profession was. She was quite clever as far as I'm concerned, very well articulate and extremely put together when it came to her chain of thought. Because as I was listening to her trial, when she was being cross-examined, I was quite impressed with the way she was responding to the lawyers as well as to the judge. Even though she was sassy, but her sassiness also had some intelligence in it. So that made me think that this was not a young girl, or this is not a woman who just grew up and did not go to some kind of formal education, meaning university or college or teachers college for that matter. So that is why I think I choose to say that she was indeed a teacher, whether primary school or high school, I'm not quite sure. So going back to Cecilia's upbringing, when she was 16, as I said, she met Driss Steyn, whom she became married to. As Cecilia was growing into her teenage age, she became what some of us used to call in high school emos or goth. And she wore dark clothes and she was fascinated about the underworld. And as a result, she took a stern interest in the whole Satanic culture or religion, so much so that she even joined the Satanic church, where she was very devoted to that church. I'm not quite sure how Driss felt about that his girlfriend was goth as well as a Satanist or whatever they are called. She basically used her teenage years as a Satanist or a goth. I think she was just being gothic rather than being a devil's worshiper or something like that. But those are the things that she was interested in, and she did also admit in court that her childhood trauma had nothing to do with her being a Satanist. So clearly in her mind she does believe that she was a Satanist, or I don't know, I'm not trying to minimize or invalidate her belief system at the time, but it is clear that Satanism or satanic religion does exist. I've always heard about it, but I've never seen it in my own 2 eyes, and I don't think I'm quite interested in such a religion either. So I will leave that to the Satanists. Now, just to take you to Krugersdorp, as I've mentioned, that Krugersdorp is a mining town back in the 1800s during the gold rush here in Johannesburg. Krugersdorp happened to be one of the towns where gold reefs were found and they would mine gold. And it is that town basically that built the mighty Johannesburg, which today is known as the City of Gold. Today, Krugersdorp, it is a beautiful area which has been turned and developed into a residential area. It's got very attractive tourism spots that you can go to. Locals have beautiful parks where they can go have picnics or some kind of a celebrations, including weddings, including birthday parties, or whatever the case might be. Many people tend to like going to Krugersdorp to relax, and many young professionals go and buy properties in Krugersdorp because currently it is a melting pot and it is being developed into the beauty that it is. Krugersdorp as well is also known to be quite quiet as well as safe because it is still filled with people who I would say are professionals, and most of the time they are at work and developing themselves, including the area itself, and the policing there, it's quite strong. So when this case broke out, people there were left in shock, and rightfully so, because it is a peaceful town. It's a small little city that used to be part of the city of Johannesburg, but it no longer is part of Johannesburg, but belongs to a different metro. So about 2007, a high school teacher by the name of Miranda Steyn, who is not related in any way with Cecilia Steyn but share the same surname, is a devoted churchgoer. One of the evenings she attended a church meeting where she was introduced to another lady by the name of Cecilia Steyn. When Miranda and Cecilia hit it off and formed a very strong bond, Miranda felt comfortable to introduce Cecilia to her two children by the name of Leroux and Marcel Steyn. However, Miranda and Cecilia's relationship grew strong to a point where it started looking quite strange, which raised a lot of church members' eyebrows, because the type of relationship that they were having did not seem natural as far as they were concerned. But there was nothing that was happening between the ladies. All that they were being two best friends. They were as if they were two peas in a pod. So as the time went on in this particular church, I'm not going to mention the name of the church to protect the image of the church as well as the members that are currently attending that church. So this particular church had another lady who becomes a third person in this story by the name of Ria. Ria used to be a senior member of this particular church. Sometimes she would give sermons if the pastor was absent, or maybe he was not feeling well. So she would take the robes and basically teach sermon on a particular Sunday or whenever the church congregated during the course of the week. Ria did not only preach or held this important position in the church, but she also counseled people who were about to get married or people that were married and having issues within their marriage. She would also counsel teenagers that were problematic either at school or at home. She would also go around and help other kids to understand their schoolwork, and also she had a soup kitchen that she had opened under the church so that it caters to the people that are living on the street, or homeless people, or people that may be struggling to put food on the table. Every single evening they will come to the church to be fed by Ria's program. So while Cecilia and Miranda were getting closer and closer, Cecilia felt comfortable enough to tell Miranda all about her childhood trauma, the things that were done to her body as a young girl. She even shared things that she never shared with anybody that she became close to. Of course, Miranda would cry, try to comfort her that, hey, everything is okay, I'm here now, I'm going to protect you, and things of that nature. Without Miranda basically noticing that she was being groomed by Cecilia into something so horrific that these two women would perpetrate on innocent people in Krugersdorp. However, when I read somewhere in the court transcripts, the parents of Cecilia Steyn said, people must not believe Cecilia because she is a pathological liar. This girl would tell a lie about anything and everything. Many a times she likes to be pompous and always being in competition with other girls, meaning that if one girl had to say, hey, my dad got a good job somewhere here, Cecilia will exaggerate her own dad's employment and say, well, my dad is no employee, he is a CEO of a big conglomerate, and of course this was to outdo the other girls. And Cecilia was also known to be a bullfighter. By bullfighter, what I mean is she was always ready for a fight. And even if she came across a fight, she would enter that fight just so she is known and feared by other children. So the parents were like, this girl, do not believe a word that she tells you. She grew up under a very loving family, a family that took care of her, a family that she had put through a lot. and yet she comes around and tell people that she was abused and neglected by her parents. So one does not know whom to believe, whether the parents or Cecilia, because at the end of the day, we know that there are families out there who neglect and abuse their children. And in the public eye, they like to play these loving parents who always took care of their children. So on this one, I think I am going to be on Cecilia's side. This is just my gut telling me I'm on Cecilia's side, because at the end of the day, how do you explain the type of person that she became? Because most of the time, people who, I'm not making excuses for her, in most cases, people that are neglected, they are the ones in the public eye like to act strong, act pompous, act as though they got it all together, when in fact they don't. So as Cecilia Stein grew older, she also became a hypochondriac. If you don't know what a hypochondriac is a person who always pretends to be sick or thinks that they are sick of all kinds of diseases, and yet they've never been diagnosed by a doctor. So that is a hypochondriac. So you will get to see during this case that Cecilia that does indeed show that she is a hypochondriac. And unfortunately for her, no one believed a word she said about her health issues. So these were the few health issues that she said she struggled with. She said she struggled with high blood pressure, heart problems. She also suffered from multiple personality disorder. Like what? Now coming to Miranda Stein. Miranda Stein was a divorced mother of two. Like I mentioned, her two children at the time in 2007, there were Leroux, who was 10 years old, and Marcel, who was 7 years old at the time when she joined this church and met with Cecilia Stein. Miranda Stein was an introvert. However, she was a daughter of a psychologist, which is quite strange because she took a liking to psychology, and she was also pretty good at judging people's character and also understanding people's issues, and would give very good, sound advice to people that came for advice from her. And the strangest thing about Miranda, as she was getting closer and closer to Cecilia, she actually crossed the line and became overly obsessed with Cecilia. She could literally worship the ground that Cecilia walked on. That is how obsessed she became of Cecilia. And Cecilia knew this and loved it, that she now had a puppet, somebody that she would pull the strings and she would do exactly what she told her to do. And that's exactly what Miranda did. Anything and everything that Cecilia said was the gospel truth. Miranda's children, Marcel and Leroux, were quite close to each other because they only had each other. However, Leroux had an issue with his mother because she always showed favoritism to his younger sister. This would hurt him every time when he tried to confront his mother about it. But of course, Miranda would dismiss him as though he was crazy. Unfortunately, Marcel and Leroux's father was nowhere to be seen when they were children. However, they grew closer when they both became adults and in jail. So coming to Cecilia and Ria, and there's some tea in this story. So apparently there were rumors in the church about Ria and Cecilia's relationship, that they were lovers. This is the same kind of rumors that were going around about Cecilia and Miranda. So clearly this church had a lot of gossipers who did not have the facts on the table, and they seemed to enjoy spreading around false rumors. Ria, like I said, she was quite devoted to the church and quite devoted to her duties as a senior member of the church. And as a result of that, she always sought counsel and mentorship from the pastor of the church. Of course, Ria and Cecilia would deny these claims, saying that this was a smear campaign against them. probably to separate them, or maybe the church members were quite jealous of them because there were two women who were doing great things for themselves. As I've mentioned before, that before Cecilia joined the church, she used to be a Satanist. One of the days as she was growing older into adulthood, she decided to drop the whole goth thing and believing in Satan and devil worshipping and whatever else that she did in that religion. She then converted into Christianity, where she met Rhea, and she and Rhea became close because Rhea would basically make her unlearn all the things about Satan or worshipping of Satan since she was a preteen into her teens, into her 20s. And so Rhea had been quite patient with her, teaching her the Bible, eventually baptizing her, and she became a reformed Satanist and became a Christian. So these are the things that Cecilia felt that Rhea helped her out with, and as a result, there was that bond between them. But at the same time, if you look closer into this relationship, I kind of get what the church members were thinking about these two women. The other thing about Cecilia that she was always fascinated about was the Bible. She will always be reading the Bible in her spare time, and she also fancied herself as a preacher, or at least given an opportunity to give a sermon in one of the Sundays. So she was not getting that opportunity because people knew her background, and as a result, some people did not feel comfortable for her to be given any opportunity where she stands in front of people and talk about Christ. And so people felt that she's discredited, which I think it's so unfair that a person is judged by their past. Okay, I get it. Her past was scary because I can imagine a person that worshipped the devil, the total opposite of what Christianity is all about, and then converts or repents and becomes a Christian. How the other church members who know what's up with this individual, what she used to do in the past, and here she is now holding the Bible and basically giving a sermon to them, that how difficult it might be for them to swallow everything that she says. However, at the end of the day, Christianity, is it not about forgiveness? Is it not about love? Is it not about tolerance? Is it not about learning from each other, as well as learning from the fact that it is possible to change from one thing to another? I thought maybe that's what the whole going to church and reading the Bible and all the parables in the Bible were all about. But clearly in this particular church, no. So anyways, so Cecilia will then take some of the things that she learned from the Bible. Basically, she would put a whole sermon that she thinks if she was given an opportunity to give, she gave those pointers to Rhea, because there was a couple of Sundays that Rhea was giving the sermon at church, and most of the things that Rhea was preaching were things that Cecilia had jotted down for her. So when Cecilia was amongst the congregants, she always felt as though she was the one that was preaching at church, and she enjoyed hearing Rhea preach her points that she had submitted to her. So one of the days, Cecilia felt, no, clearly in this church, I am not going to grow spiritually. I will not be given recognition as well as opportunities that other Christians in the church were being given. So she went to Miranda and said, hey, you know what? I'm thinking of opening my own church. Of course, Miranda will support that because she's obsessed with Cecilia. After she had obviously not convinced Miranda about leaving this particular church and forming their own church, she then went to Rhea and said, hey, Rhea, I was thinking, because you and I work so well with each other, why don't you, me, and Miranda open our own church? But Rhea was like, I don't think so. I'm fine where I am. But if you want to do something like that, hey, go right ahead, expand the kingdom of God and preach the word and spread it to the world. So Cecilia was not quite happy with the fact that Rhea rejected her request. But she knew exactly why Rhea had rejected her idea. It's because Rhea and the pastor of the church were quite close. The pastor's name was Reggie Beddington. Reggie Beddington and Rhea were close because the pastor used to be Rhea's mentor. She and the pastor will sit down together, and the pastor will draw up the curriculum of the church, that things that will be taught in like Bible class or Kids Kingdom within the church, as well as sermons that they were going to give. The pastor and Rhea would sit down together, and Cecilia hated that with a passion, because that meant that she was being left out in the cold. And so she tried to rear in Rhea by submitting her own curriculum that Rhea should be teaching whenever she got the opportunity to preach at church. But it became a point where Rhea herself would now ignore Cecilia's points and basically take the pastor's pointers, and then she would carry them through. And as a result of that, Cecilia would not be happy at all. And so she felt it was time to leave this church. Otherwise, some nasty things were going to happen. No, I am actually incorrect about Rhea rejecting the idea of starting a new church. As a matter of fact, I'm so sorry about this. As a matter of fact, when Cecilia approached Rhea after approaching Miranda, who agreed, Rhea did agree to leave this particular church and start their own church. I'm so sorry about that. She did agree, and they named their new church as the Overcomers Through Christ. That it was the name of the church that they established. And while they were busy establishing this church, for some reason, these women were starting to gain members. People were coming in and trickling in large numbers, because they were also interested in a church that was run by women that were quite intelligent, women of God, women that when they preached the word, it really hit to the core. And as a result of that, they felt that Rhea felt that she was naked without Pastor Reggie. And as a result, she went to Pastor Reggie and asked him to resign from the church and come and join the Overcomers Through Christ Church. And surprisingly, Pastor Reggie does resign in that church and then moves to the Overcomers. So I think that's where I confused Rhea not leaving that other church. As a matter of fact, she left the church together with Cecilia and Miranda, and she went and collected Pastor Reggie. Of course, Cecilia was not happy with the fact that Pastor Reggie was now being brought to the very place where she had decided to open a church so that she could get away from the very man that was taking away her best friend. So, of course, the mentorship between Pastor Reggie and Rhea continued under the roof of the Overcomers. And Cecilia did not like it at all. She felt that this pastor was taking away somebody she really, really cared about. So, as you and I know that, sometimes love does turn to hate. And when love turns to hate, very, very bad things happen. I don't think that when you become an ex with your ex, you wish them all well. Some of us do, but there's that part where we hold back some things like, I wish you good, but, But with Cecilia, she was on full-on war within herself about how she was going to deal with this pastor and Rhea. She did not like it at all. And Miranda also noticed that Cecilia does not like the fact that the pastor is here. She too would have her own issues about Cecilia worrying a lot about Rhea, because she felt that she was good enough for Cecilia. So whatever it was that was going on between these three women was quite strange. I still believe that there was a friendship between Miranda and Cecilia. However, on Rhea and Cecilia, something was definitely going on there, which I'm now going to make an assumption what it was, but I'm just using my brain, I suppose. So as the church was beginning to grow, it recruited a man by the name of Zach Valentine. Zach Valentine had a girlfriend whom he married immediately after joining the church, and then he asked his girlfriend to be a part and parcel of this church and also engage in the activities of growing the church. This girl's name was Michaela Valentine. So Michaela Valentine, she really did commit herself to the overcomers through Christ Church, and she recruited other people. She would also be a lead singer in the choir, lead singer during the sermons, and also she would be given an opportunity to preach because she was quite good with the Bible as well. So she was like a full-on leader of the church, which she was impressing everybody, including her own husband, Zach. I don't think Zach, when he joined this church, he thought that he would be so involved in it that he would even be chosen for position of leadership. He thought that he was just going to be an ordinary member that came to church on a Sunday, and that was that. It turned out that he showed some great potential that Cecilia saw in him. So soon after Michaela and Zach joined the church, two more prominent members of the church joined by the name of Natasha Berger and Joyce Benzia. So Natasha Berger was a very successful attorney, and Joyce Benzia was just an ordinary worker that lived in a very nice part of Krugersdorp. I think the reason why she was living a nice life is because her husband, or late husband, I'm not quite sure if the husband was alive, but he seemingly had a very good life that he built for him and Joyce together with the children. However, the children no longer lived with Joyce. They lived their own lives, married elsewhere, but she lived in a very nice area of Krugersdorp as neighbor to Natasha Berger. So one day, Pastor Reggie Bennison decided to change the curriculum that Cecilia had put together, and that angered Cecilia. She went straight to Rhea and said, "You see, your guy, he just changed everything that I had put together. You must not forget that I'm a co-founder of this church. I too have ideas, and these ideas cannot be ignored. I say this curriculum will go." But of course, Rhea, having Pastor Reggie as her mentor, she felt that, listen, he is an elder and he knows better than we do. Why don't we learn from him so that we can do better as we move forward? But Cecilia was like, I know better. This is the curriculum we are going with for this church. These are the things that I want us to teach and preach about in this church, not Reggie. Reggie is not the co-founder of this church. It is us. So listen to me. Unfortunately, the relationship between Rhea and Cecilia fell apart because Rhea would not listen a word to Cecilia regarding Pastor Reggie. So over the next 2 years, Cecilia and Rhea's relationship had strained. Basically, it was no longer existing. However, they did meet, they were in interaction with each other only because of the church. Other than that, they never hung out together like they used to. They never visited each other, never called each other or text each other like they used to. It was just a strained relationship, almost like enemies. But inside of Cecilia, she was boiling with anger and hatred towards Pastor Reggie, as well as this time with Rhea. So to spite Rhea, Cecilia decided to become close to the church members, so close that she began to groom them. She sensitized them. She told them about all the wrong things about the overcomers through Christ Church, and she started spreading some kind of rumor about Pastor Reggie and Rhea, and that Pastor Reggie is an old man who is married with kids and grandchildren, and yet this young lady is seducing him and doing all kinds of nonsense with him. So of course the church members were like, no, that's not true. But at the same time, why shouldn't they believe Cecilia? After all, she is a chosen woman of God. So as she was becoming closer and closer to the church members, guess what Cecilia does? Cecilia then, one of the days, decides to call the members of the church in secret and then tells them that she and Miranda were going to open a new church. And if they were interested, they should follow them. Surprisingly, the majority of the church members of Overcomers Through Christ Church did follow Cecilia and Miranda to start a new church. And this new church that they established, that they named it Electus Pedus. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Electus Pedus, meaning chosen by God. Now, Cecilia believed that she was chosen by God, and as a result of that, she started developing a God complex. And as a result of developing a God complex, and she established this church and found a venue for this church, she then ordered all the church members to show devotion and commitment, not to God, but to her. By doing what? By inscribing Electus Pedus? Is it Pedus? I will put the name on the screen. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it's Latin for chosen by God. She basically ordered the church to tattoo the name of the church on their body parts. When some of the church members asked, why should we do that? She said, well, other Christians do tattoo the crucifix on their bodies. Some even tattoo the name of their church or even their pastor. So why wouldn't we show such devotion as well? The reason why she had done so is because she wanted to see and also know that the members of this of Electus Pedus was truly devoted to her. I'm not quite sure when God was removed out of the equation, but she was interested about the church members committed and devoted to her as Cecilia Stain. And of course, all the church members did exactly that. They went and got tattoos of the church name, Electus Pedus, on them. And of course, Cecilia was quite happy about that. However, Cecilia, whenever she was sitting alone, she was plotting revenge against Ria and Pastor Reggie. So on the stand, LaRue testified in court that Cecilia actually instructed the entire church to put several other tattoos on their bodies. When he was asked why Cecilia ordered them to put tattoos on their bodies, he said that it's because she felt that she did not trust the church members and they needed to show devotion to her. So not so long after her church members had tattooed the name of the church as well as other tattoos around their bodies, this is when she sat down and started premeditating a very gruesome plan against Pastor Reggie as well as Ria. Cecilia, according to LaRue's testimony, said that she wants to cause so much pain against Ria. She will not touch Ria, but Ria will see people she loves, care about, and also talks to go through the worst kind of pain because of the way she defied her and the love she had for the both of them. So not long after the premeditated plan was concluded, and now it was being put in motion, this is when members of the Overcomers Through Christ Church started experiencing bad things happening to them. The worst one was Natasha Berger, whose car was punctured and the window broken several times. And every time her car would get broken into or her tires slashed, the police would not be able to find the perpetrator of this crime. Twice, Natasha's house was petrol bombed. Now, if you don't know what is a petrol bomb is basically gas. You go to the gas station and you buy like a liter of gas, and then you take a beer bottle, pour the gas, and take a piece of cloth, put it in the mouth of the bottle, but you must wet that piece of cloth with the gas, and then you set it alight, and then you basically throw it through the window of that particular target that you had. Here in South Africa, during the apartheid, particularly black on black political violence, that is how they burnt down the political opposition's house, or somebody that was considered to be a snitch or worked with the apartheid government. And so if you were suspected to be a apartheid government spy and you were black, they will petrol bomb your house basically. So Natasha's house was petrol bombed about twice. The church, Overcomers through Christ Church, was also almost burned down to the ground. So all these bad luck that was happening to the Overcomers, no one was able to pinpoint exactly who was perpetrating these crimes. Now, because they were not getting caught, these, of course, this is Cecilia's people. They felt that they were invincible, and as a result, they could do whatever they wanted, and they still believed that they were not going to get caught. And indeed, they were not caught for all these crimes that they were committing against the church, against Natasha, especially Natasha Berger. I'm not quite sure why they targeted her more than they did with the other church members. Now, Natasha was one of the people that they went to and said, hey, leave Overcomers and come with us to start Electors Podias. But Natasha had refused and said, no, I'm committed to this church, but there's no problem with you starting your own church. I think they got offended by that, or the fact that they thought they needed to have somebody of her caliber in the Electors Podias church. I'm not quite sure, but they really put this woman through a lot. Many a times, Natasha's house would have people ringing the doorbell, but when she opened, she would not find anybody. One day, she returned from work and she found a pool of blood in her doorstep, and she was not quite sure what was all this about. And when she called the police, of course, the police, they could not do anything about what they had seen on that crime scene. So Natasha did confide in her parents and told them that, listen, I am going through this and that, but I'm not afraid because I have God's protection. The blood of Jesus is going to save me from all this evil that is happening to me. But of course, her parents were quite worried because Natasha Berger was the only child. So now the members of the Overcomers Through Christ Church were living in fear. They did not know what next was going to happen to them. And who is this person or people that were busy trying to disturb their peace? So while the members of the Overcomers Through Christ Church were scratching their heads, wondering why this is happening to them, unfortunately, in July 2012, the police will be called to a double homicide in a complex in Krugersdorp. 2 women were declared brutally murdered, and they were identified as 33-year-old Natasha Berger and 68-year-old Joyce Benzia. The police described the crime scene or the bodies to have been slit on the throat with something, and also some kind of blunt force object were used to bashing them on the head. Now, because Krugersdorp was known to be safe and also developing, this caught the eyes of the media, who went about and exposed the crime scene. And part of the crime scene, on the wall, there was some kind of drawing that looked like a satanic type of drawing that was done with Natasha Berger's blood. So as a result, the media duped this killing as a satanic killing in Krugersdorp. So the word spread around Krugersdorp. There was a satanic ritual killing, and as a result, people lived in fear and also wanted to know what the police were doing about finding these satanic worshippers that had killed two innocent people who happened to be devoted Christians. So after the death of Natasha Berger, her mother was put on antidepressants and her father became extremely ill from a broken heart. Remember, Natasha was their only child. So it was quite devastating for these two people who lost a loved child who was so devoted to God as far as they were concerned. Marcel Stein, who was 14 years old at the time of the murder of Joyce Benzia and Natasha Berger, said she was present at the killing of Natasha and Joyce. She said she even participated because that is what Cecilia had instructed them to do, to kill these two people. Marcel, on the stand, continued to testify that Cecilia had instructed Zach Valentine together with his wife, Michaela Valentine, to go and kill Natasha and Joyce. So for the next 6 weeks, the Valentines would stake out Natasha's house. So when the Valentines were ready to attack Natasha, they both went to Natasha's door. This is after Natasha just returned from work. They knocked on her door. Natasha peeped through the door hole and realized that she doesn't know the people that were knocking on her door. And they basically asked her to open the door, but Natasha refused to open the door. Instead, she closed the curtains and went inside her house, basically ignoring these two individuals that are standing outside of her house. When the court was interested to know from Marcel why Natasha had to die, Marcel said because apparently, according to Cecilia, Natasha and Joyce made a prayer that made orphans somewhere in the United States of America to get killed. And as a result, they needed to be punished. When the court wanted to know why must they be killed, she said, well, I don't know, but she believed that Cecilia was chosen by God and therefore she took instructions from God, and as a result, she would instruct either of them to carry out a certain act on other people. In this case, God spoke to Cecilia and ordered her to have Natasha and Joyce killed because of the prayer that they gave out, which killed orphaned children in the US. So after the Valentine's plan failed and Natasha did not open the door, they had to come up with plan B. So they came back the following day because they noticed that Joyce was at home. So they came this time with a big present wrapped beautifully, and they went over to Joyce's house, knocked on the door, and basically introduced themselves as Natasha's friends, and they had come to give her her gift. However, when they went over, they tried to knock and she did not open, so they were wondering if it's possible to wait for Natasha here, and when she comes, then they would just go and give her gift and then leave. Of course, Joyce, being the kind lady that she was, she opened the door, welcomed them into the house. The moment she welcomed them into the house, Zach then pulled out a hammer and began to threaten Joyce, basically forcing her to write a letter on a piece of paper to Natasha, basically telling Natasha to come over immediately. And then she, after Joyce was done writing the letter, then she gave the letter to Michaela, who ran to Natasha's house and slid this letter under Natasha's door, and then went back to Joyce's house. When she returned, Joyce was already bludgeoned to death by her husband. So they waited for Natasha. Not long after, arrived at home, and when she opened her door, she saw the note, and then she went to Joyce's house. The moment she opened the house and entered, she was attacked by both Michaela and her husband Zach, and basically they struck her on the head with a hammer, just like they did with Joyce. Basically, Michaela took the knife and began to knife Natasha all over her body, from her chest down to her stomach until she died next to her friend Joyce. And that is when the Valentines hopped on their car and sped off. In August of 2012, police are called to a 75-year-old Reggie Beddingson's house. He too was bludgeoned to death. He was bludgeoned with an axe on the head, on the chest, every single way. Basically, his head was almost dismembered from his body. So it is believed that Reggie died a slow and painful death before he was axed on the neck. Basically, what the police found was that he was knifed he was knifed on every part of his body. He was knifed on the arms, on the legs, on the chest, on the stomach, on the side of his body. And eventually he was then axed, almost decapitating his head of his body. You can tell this was a passionate crime. Remember, Pastor Reggie is the one that was mentoring Rhea, and they formed a mentor-mentee relationship that Cecilia hated. So Cecilia ordered or instructed the Valentines once again to carry out this murder. So Michaela said that when they went to Pastor's house, they went pretending to be policemen. They were dressed in South African Police Service uniform that was given to them by Cecilia. If you remember earlier in the story, I mentioned that Cecilia is married to a South African police officer. So of course he would have his own uniform in the house. So Cecilia used that uniform and gave to the Valentines to use to pretend to be cops when they knock and kill Reggie Beddingson. Amongst the people that were present during the killing of Pastor Reggie was Miranda. Now, Miranda knew Pastor Reggie very well because she too had a close relationship with him while they were still at the first church before they started the Overcomers. So when she pounced on Pastor, she made sure that he died. She says she even testified unashamedly in court that she made sure that she lifted his jersey that he was wearing so that the knife would not be hindered in penetrating his skin. She says she just went and knifed him as many times as she could, and she was paying attention to his neck to see if blood was still running on his neck. When she realized that the blood had stopped running, that's when she knew he had died, and she was just covered in blood, she testifies. And she said this nonchalant way as if she didn't care that she took a life of a pastor or a human being for that matter. When Miranda was asked by the court, why did you kill Reggie the way you did? She said, well, I was ordered by Cecilia to do so. So, well, Cecilia is a chosen one by God, so there was no way I was going to question that. I did what I had to do. So to make matters worse, on the day of Pastor Reggie's funeral, Rhea received a box that was in front of her door. She took the box inside the house, opened it, and found a large chunk of human skin in it with a note that read, let me read it to you, and I quote, "Now you can have your little piece of Reggie." So I'm supposing that since she took Reggie away from Rhea, she decided that, okay, you two can have a piece of Reggie. I'm not quite sure why Rhea did not realize that it is actually her friend or former friend that is responsible for all these killings and all these bad things that were happening to them, because that box should have given away that it was Cecilia who was behind all these things. I don't understand why Rhea did not go to the police and say, I have a suspect, can you look into her because of whatever reason. But I guess that was not important. I'm not quite sure. Probably she has her own reasons as to why she didn't do that. So on the 4th of October 2012, a real estate agent by the name of Estelle Skitter gets a phone call from Zach Valentine. Basically, Zach Valentine pretends to the real estate agent that he's interested in selling his home. So he wanted her to come and assess the home and basically list it for sale. Of course, Estelle, being excited and all, makes an appointment to meet with Zach at his house on the 4th of October 2012. When the realtor arrived at Zach's house, he was not there. He was running late. But it was not long before Zach started running towards the house, and that is when the realtor realized that it was a possible client coming home. So immediately Zach apologizes to Estelle for being late, and so he said, let's proceed going inside the house. So what Zach did was, instead of entering the house through the front door, as always, he entered the house through the garage door. So basically, he opened the garage door to give this realtor a tour of the house so that she would have an idea of whatever it is that realtors do when they will list a house for sale. So they went into the garage. As they entered the garage, they started going to the first bedroom, I guess on the ground floor. Showed her the living room, the dining room, TV room, the kitchen, and things like that. So they had to now go upstairs. So just before they went upstairs, this is when Zach got onto his cell phone to call his wife to come home, because the realtor was at home, was now in the house, ready to assess the house. So Zach made a call, but there would be no answer on Michaela's side. So he eventually told the realtor, wait here, let me go upstairs and check. Maybe she's at home. Maybe she took a nap waiting for us. And so he ran upstairs. The next thing that the realtor hears is this excruciating screams coming from Zach, where he said in Afrikaans, "Ach nee me liefie, ach nee liefie," basically meaning in English, "Oh no, my love, no, my love, no, my love." And that is when the realtor got concerned, and she ran upstairs and she opened the door where she heard this shouting coming from, but the room was pitch dark. So she asked Zach to please open the blinders so she can see what is happening. So immediately Zach goes and opened the blinders, and voila,